Well, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate you joining us today, and we're going to get started. My name is Elizabeth Helpman. I am the volunteer coordinator for Moms Clean Air Force, and thank you again for joining us tonight. Before we dive in, like I said, please take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat. Please put your name, pronouns, where you are joining us from. Just a couple of quick notes. This session is being recorded, but only the presentation slides will be posted and promoted. Otherwise, our group conversations, they will never be recorded. We also want to remind everyone in our community norms to stay muted unless you are speaking, and feel free to use the chat or raise your hand if you have any questions. One of our favorite principles is to take space, make space. And that means that we want you to fully participate while also leaving room for others to share as well. So with that, I would love to introduce and pass over to Sam Schmidt, my colleague.
Thanks, Elizabeth. We'll just have a quick agenda here. We'll be going through a bunch of stuff today. I know Elizabeth talked about all of this already a bit, but we'll be teaching folks basically the basics of advocacy. And just a reminder, this is part one of our three-part series that are each 1 hour long. So hopefully you can make it till 8:30 tonight. We're excited to have you all here. We're going to be talking about Mom's Clean Air Force and the power of advocacy. We're going to be talking about air pollution, climate change, health harms, and environmental justice. And then, most importantly, we're going to be talking about your role in the movement and how you can figure out what that is and how you can get plugged in. But with that, I will talk a little bit about Mom's Clean Air Force and the coalitions that we're a part of. We're obviously a part of a much larger climate coalition and climate movement that you all are a part of as well. And we're really grateful that you're all a part of it. But Mom's Clean Air Force is a community of over 1.6 million parents and caregivers united to fight against climate change and air pollution for the sake of protecting children's health and future generations. So we think about harnessing the power of parents who are obviously very passionate about protecting their kids to fight for what we call justice in every breath. So fighting for environmental justice. And effectively, we work to democratize decision making. So there's otherwise these really opaque government processes like at the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, within Congress, all the folks that are making decisions about our lives. We want to make sure that those are really accessible to parents, caregivers, regular citizens, and that every parent deserves to feel empowered to protect their children and our collective future. Recently, I'll just share an anecdote that almost 50 moms and caregivers testified at the EPA, urging them to continue regulating climate change and climate emissions. We've also had tens of thousands of folks sign petition signatures. Just in the past few months, we've had thousands of folks attend events. And every year, we have hundreds of people like you meet with their lawmakers. So one thing that I want to invite everyone to do is just to ground ourselves a little bit. And I would ask everyone to just drop in the chat, what is something driving your advocacy? So it can be, your child, your grandchild, your care about our collective future. Just take 1 minute and share in the chat what is driving you? What made you come to this training today? Well, thanks for doing that first activity, everyone. It's great to hear why you're all here. You're all really passionate. You're taking time out of your evening to be here with us. So just keep that centered in your mind in terms of why you're here, why you're spending the time doing this, and why you want to keep fighting. And that's also a way to relate to new people that you're trying to bring into this movement is by asking them why they care about climate and why they care about air pollution or why they care about this fight as well. So next, I want to talk about the power of advocacy. Obviously, the news is really hard these days, but what keeps me grounded, and I think keeps a lot of people grounded, is knowing that real change only requires 3.5% of the population. So we really only need to activate 3.5% of the US. That's the context that we work in. You can think globally, and it's a bit larger, but that's a really tangible amount of people to mobilize and to successfully get to take action. So, um, with that, I'll talk about collective action, what that means, what it is. Basically, individuals banding together to overcome a shared problem. So pooling skills, resources, ideas, capacity. Um, Basically, the idea is that when we work together, it lowers the risk for everyone and it makes our voices much louder collectively. Um, so thinking about, who is in your community and who can you take collective action with so that that amplifies your power. A saying I've been seeing a lot lately in the movement spaces is the power of the people is greater than the people in power, right? It's natural for us to feel hopeless in this time, but ultimately the legitimacy of power is in the hands of everyday people like us. And we have the power to, make sure that folks are held accountable. So we're going to be talking about that a lot. And I'm going to turn it over to Lisa from the Michigan Clinicians for Climate Action. She's the executive director. She's been a long-term partner of Elizabeth Hotman in Michigan. And she's going to talk to us about the basics of air pollution, climate change, environmental justice, and public health. Obviously, knowledge is power, so turning it over to her to share some of her knowledge.
Thanks so much, Sam, and thank you, Elizabeth, and thanks to everybody who's here today. I just have to tell you, I'm a retired doc, and I got interested in doing this work back in 2013 because I was concerned about the future for my son. So, like you, being a mom or a parent is what drives me with this work. And I have to say that over the years, I've worked with a whole host of groups, but Moms Clean Air Force has been out front consistently. As a health professional, I care very much about credible information, and the information that you'll get from moms is accurate. It's based on peer-reviewed literature, and I'm incredibly grateful to them. And leading with uh, the concern for our children is incredibly influential, and it's influential across party lines. So I've been asked to talk about the health impacts of air pollution, climate change, and how certain populations have experienced them disproportionately. So, if there is any one thing that I want you to take away from this talk, it's that whatever we do to address climate change, almost anything will improve human health. And a big part of the reason that that's the case is as we transition away from fossil fuels, as we plant trees, as we electrify things, we clean up the air, and that improves health. And those people who will get the greatest benefits are those who have suffered the worst impacts historically. So that's only fair. So, um, air pollution is basically toxins in the air. They are not naturally occurring. They are substances that are created from burning fossil fuels and power plants, having internal combustion engines in our cars and our trucks, manufacturing, industrial agriculture, and now we're seeing the impacts of wildfire smoke. Wildfires are becoming more prevalent and more intense because of climate change, and wildfire smoke, according to some research, is way more toxic, maybe as much as 10 times more toxic than air pollution derived from other sources. That's in part, especially when the wildfires also involve urban areas and plastics and other chemicals are aerosolized and then we breathe them in. Now, children are particularly vulnerable, and that's because their brains and their bodies are still developing. They're outside more than adults are. Their heart rates are faster. They're breathing faster. So they bring in those air pollutants, and then their little hearts are beating and they're going all over the body before they have a chance to develop. And it is surprising, but in the US, 4 out of 10 people live where air quality is still unhealthy. Nearly 28 million Americans suffer from asthma, and globally, air pollution is the fourth leading cause of death. And if you take indoor air pollution and outdoor air pollution, that's responsible for 6 million deaths per year globally. So that's huge. Next slide. Now let's talk about climate change. Climate change occurs because of the concentration of naturally occurring gases, which are called greenhouse gases. And those gases form a blanket over the earth. And we would not know life on earth as we do right now without greenhouse gases. But since we've been burning fossil fuels in order to power our economy, things like oil and coal and natural gas, the concentration of those natural occurring greenhouse gases has increased tremendously, exponentially, really. And they form a blanket over the earth. Now, that blanket is getting thicker and thicker, which means that the heat underneath that blanket is being trapped and changing the natural conditions that life formed in. And it's making it harder for us to live as we've historically lived over the years. That's what climate change is. And probably the most prevalent thing that we are noticing are extreme weather events. Now, I'm going to have you drop in the chat how many extreme weather events that cost $1 billion each do you think have occurred in the US? Write it in the chat. I'm going to keep talking. We'll go back and look at that afterwards. Give us your best guess. I've seen 4, I've seen 10. Let's see what else we get. Good. Okay. 180. Wow. Yeah. There are a lot. 27 is the answer. That is unbelievable. That is ton. So, now what's amazing as well is that we can power the globe on something that's cheaper and way more healthy, and that's solar, wind, and battery storage. It is abundant. All we need to do is build out the fossil fuel, to build out, not the fossil fuel, but the infrastructure for us to use the solar and wind. And prior to this administration, we had the tools in place to start building that out very, very rapidly. And the rest of the world gets this. The rest of the world knows that solar and wind is cheaper. The rest of the world is getting out ahead and doing it. So that's kind of good news because it's the global concentrations that make a difference to us. So because other countries are going ahead and doing it, that will benefit all of us. Now, we know that fossil fuel companies want to continue to make money. So what they have done or are starting to do is pivot towards plastics and petrochemicals. They're made from fossil fuels as well. We anticipate that global plastic production will increase 3 times by 2050. And it's not good for our health and it's not good for our environment. So Sam is going to put in the chat a link to register to one of Micah's upcoming webinars on October 23rd, where we're having an expert physician, MD, PhD, talk about the health impacts of climate change. And we'd love for you to come if you want to come. Next slide. Now, how does climate change impact our health? Well, it's certainly not good to be, in a flood and be overcome by water, but it occurs, the most common way is that it exacerbates pre-existing conditions. So asthma and respiratory illness, which we've already heard about, caused by air pollution, tends to get worse. It gets worse in heat. And when things are hot, air quality gets worse as well. So our asthma gets worse, our respiratory illnesses get worse as the climate changes. As the seasons are warmer, for a longer period of time, the amount of pollen produced on the weeds has actually increased. The length of the number of days that the pollen is around has increased, and they actually spark a more intense reaction in the human body. It's what we call increased antigenicity. You don't need to know that word, but allergies are getting worse. Now, we also know as warmer and wetter conditions are around, the number of ticks have increased. And in Michigan, Lyme disease is really increasing, as it is in many parts of the North and Midwest. Other types of viral infections are also common from mosquito-borne disease that is increasing as well. Now, when things are hot, we're noticing that it's also more humid. The increased CO2 level increases the humidity in the air. And why does that matter? Well, it matters because when we sweat, if we don't evaporate that sweat, we can't cool down. So if we can't cool down, the rate of heat exhaustion and heat stroke increases. That's really bad for outdoor workers. It's also bad for our young athletes, and every year we lose a few young athletes to heat stroke. Heat and air pollution combine also to increase the incidence of stillbirths and preterm deliveries, and that leads to health impacts in the infant that can last a lifetime. And then finally, all of these things cause anxiety. Eco anxiety is what we call it. And then after extreme weather events, post traumatic stress disorder. It's hard on the adults, it's also really hard on the kids. Next slide. And then the final point is the fact that while we're all impacted, some communities are disproportionately impacted. So the closer you are to fossil fuel combustion, the closer you are to industrialization, the closer you are to a heavy burden of traffic, where the interstates are greater and there's more diesel and truck, the greater your exposure to air pollution. And when the infrastructure is hard and concrete, things don't cool down. So the harder it is to cool down in extreme weather events, and climate impacts are worse. So what we do know is there are many, many ways to prove this, but we know that Black kids are 5 times more likely to be hospitalized due to asthma and 8 times more likely to die from asthma. 68% of Latinos live in areas that the quality of air is not healthy. They don't meet federal air standards. And 13% of Indigenous children have asthma, and that is in comparison to 8.6% of non-Indigenous. Again, the good news with that is as we transition away from fossil fuels, we will improve air quality and everybody will get more healthy, but especially those who have suffered disproportionately. So I'll pass that on back to Sam. Or is
Thanks,
it
Lisa.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, I'm going to pass it to Elizabeth, but
Sure.
appreciate
Yeah,
you
we'll just
sharing
pass it
that.
around. We have all
Perfect.
a bunch of wonderful things to share with each other. I just want to say Lisa is not only a partner with you in Michigan, but just in general, the clinicians for climate action are just a wonderful, trusted partner. And I cannot say how wonderful it is to have you bring your trusted perspective to this table to help uplift all these families. And thank you for taking the time to do this. By the way, everyone, she's one of the busiest people I've ever known. And the fact that she made time for us tonight, I feel honored, honestly. So thank you again, Lisa, for being here. And with that, now we get to do some interaction and some games here. I just want us to think about what our role is in this movement, what we bring, what our experiences are, what passions do we have about this. So Deepa Iyer created this beautiful framework of movement roles to help us think about many ways we can contribute. So, for example, healers might be doctors, like my friend Lisa, on the front lines. Weavers might help us connect climate with racial justice. Builders organize mutual aid within networks, and caregivers drop off meals to families in need. Storytellers remind us of how generations have survived and thrived. All of these things have been wonderful ways of connecting our work with others. So I'd like you for just to take a minute to think about what role or roles resonate with you, maybe jot it down. So I will um, say that I consider myself a weaver. And I love connecting different folks with each other to uplift voices and work. And I find that very important in helping amplify storytellers. Um, Now let's build on that idea and framework. Ayana Elizabeth Johnson that helps us figure out what climate actions make the most sense for our personality. So that's this next slide here, and you can see these awesome little bubbles. Um, For example, from our community, we have Esteban Gast, who realized his strength was making people laugh. So he brings climate into his comedy. I also do that. Um, Susie Hicks, she loved the theater and working with kids. So they created a children's series called Susie Hicks and the Climate Chick to help young people learn about climate solutions. Let's just take a few minutes here. Let's take about 3 minutes here to reflect on these few questions that I have for you. So these are my questions. What brings you joy? What are you good at? And what work needs doing? If you want to jot down your ideas, I would love to hear from anyone who'd like to share their climate action. And
Elizabeth,
now I will turn it to Sam, who
perfect.
will pick up from here.
I'm actually going to keep us on this for another minute and challenge people to be a little bit more granular and see if there's any sort of next steps that we can come up with in our own lives. I think that these answers are all so wonderful, but what does that look like in practice, right? What does healing look like? I saw something on social media the other day. An activist had built chairs at their local bus stops because they like to build things. They like to be with their friends. They're good at building things. And the work that needs to be done is that people need to feel comfortable using public transit, right? So thinking creatively about the things that bring you joy, the things you're good at, and the things that need to be done. Does anyone have any thoughts on small projects, big projects, visions for what they could take on in their own community? Or something that they're proud of that they've done at the intersection of these questions in the past? And I'll invite people to raise their hand and come off mute this time if anyone is comfortable doing that. We'll move on to our next part of this, which hopefully will shift things to be a little bit more tangible. So just talking about the strategy and tactics that we use at Mom's Clean Air Force, this is just some of them. It's really just the ones that come to the top of my mind and are at the forefront of the work that we're doing right now. So I will encourage people throughout this slide to drop things in the chat if you know of any tactics or strategies that maybe you're using in your communities or that we've been using that you've seen on our website or anything like that. Please share those in the chat. We would love to hear more ideas and more tactics because I think that people are recognizing more and more that the sort of old playbook isn't working as well as it used to, or it's not working at all, in a lot of ways. So, how can we come up with new ideas and new tactics that create the sort of monumental change that we need to have a just transition, which, a just transition refers to moving to a clean economy that is equitable and just for all people. But as we start thinking about this, sort of breaking this up into three parts, we have influencing decision makers. So, oh, sorry. Educating the public and gathering people. So I think a lot of you talked about, healing and all of these different roles that you are occupying in the movement. And gathering people, I think, is a really healing one. So we'll get to that in a second. But influencing decision makers. So meeting with decision makers to literally just educate them. I think that we put our politicians, our government officials, people that we elect on a pedestal. We think that they know everything about these issues. They act like they know everything about the issues, and in reality, they certainly do not. So it's really important that we are making sure that they have the real facts, and that they're being told the stories of the people that they're supposed to be representing. So we will show you some resources right after this on how you can use our fact sheets on our website, to advocate in your communities. But step one is really just making sure that the people that are making decisions have the information that they need, and know that people care about the things that they're doing and that people are watching them. Um, Next is signing petitions and writing letters or public comments. So these are sort of more official channels, putting it in writing that you're concerned with something or that you want them to take action on an issue that you care about. I will just share with everyone that a petition is effectively a sort of template that you fill in, and then it gets mailed off as an email or as a public comment to whatever government entity it is supposed to be sent off to. So you can always sign lots of petitions and customize them. When you go on to different groups' websites, you'll plug in your name, your address, whatever it may be, and based on your address, they will send your petition to the correct decision maker that's in your district, in your state, represents you in whatever way. But you can always go in and customize those templates, and that'll make your story a lot more compelling, because folks are required to read these things for the most part. They're required to get comments from the public, from citizens. They're required to listen to us. And the more that they hear authentic stories, the more moral agency and moral urgency they feel. And that can be a really powerful tool that doesn't take too long. And you don't have to do any research about who to send it to because often groups like ours will have that information readily available and will just send it for you. Um, in terms of another one for influencing decision makers, testifying at local hearings is a really important one. So keeping an eye out at the local county level, at your town level, at your school board level. Can you show up to a meeting and speak on an issue? Often they are required, again, to listen to the public. And while it may be intimidating to do that, we're here to help. And hopefully we are teaching you the basics of doing that. That we'll talk more about this in our next two training series. But testifying at different hearings at all levels of government is really important because it also goes into the public record. So it's not just that they have to listen to you, it's also that it is setting precedent for the future. And often the rules that they're making and the decisions that they're making are challenged in court cases in the future. And so the power of having the public weigh in can be brought up time and time again. The next bucket is educating the public and creating urgency from public opinion, sort of um, winning in the court of public approval, public opinion. So writing to your local newspaper, we'll talk about this a lot in our next training on storytelling and on media, but can you write an opinion piece and submit it to your local newspaper? Can you write a letter to the editor and get it published in your local newspaper? This is a really It's not easy, but it's a really effective way to get your opinion out there. And especially when you're able to back it up with fact, and we'll again show you our fact sheets so that you can utilize those. It's a really, really compelling way to get climate and air pollution and whatever issue you care about into the minds of people nearby you in your community, which is really important for the sake of collective action and making sure that more than just you is fighting for this issue. Another one is sharing articles on social media, sharing resources with your community. You have the most influence over the people that you are already connected to, already have trust with, already have relationships with. How can you use that to make sure that they're getting the education as well? I think we make a lot of assumptions about how much or how little people know about certain issues, and often those assumptions should be challenged. And lastly, again, thinking about trust, talking to your friends and family and making sure that they know. You never know what room someone is going to be in, what decision they could be making, who they could be influencing. So expanding your network is a really compelling way to get the word out there about an issue that you care about. And lastly, similar to talking to friends and family, gathering people. So a big one that we do is postcard parties. So we often do this right before elections, just telling people to vote. We are a nonpartisan organization. We think that clean air should be nonpartisan. It's not always, but it should be. And we encourage folks to gather together and write postcards to remind everyone to get out and do their civic duty and to vote. We also do phone banking, which again, similarly reminds people about the power of their action. And then lastly, going to protests, gathering with people in the streets is a really important way to make sure that our officials understand that people care and they're willing to take to the streets about an issue. Okay, so next, in order to execute those tactics, it's really important to be involved in your local community. Advocacy relies on building community so that you can take action with others, and take collective action, which amplifies your impact so that it's not just you by yourself. Knowing your neighbors and your local community is also really important in times of extreme weather. So we see this more and more as communities are hit with extreme weather, that the folks that know their neighbors, and know their communities and know where to go for resources are the best prepared. So this is not just about the climate movement now. It's also about resilience and it's about adaptation as we adjust to a new climate that we're living in. So thinking about how to get plugged in, often things already exist. Often groups already exist. Often communities already exist. Who do you know that is already in whatever community you want to be a part of? So whether it's, for me, the DC climate community, right? Who can I call that maybe knows more people that I don't know that would be able to connect me? What other communities, groups, identities do you belong to? Would they be interested in the same topic? So again, using climate, but this tr can transcend to any social movement. Are you all already connected some way via communication, email, WhatsApp group, Signal, all of that sort of stuff? Can you already communicate with them all in one place? And if the group that you're looking for doesn't have a way to communicate, step one is to make one, and to start communicating about things that are maybe outside the realm of what you were previously talking about and getting people ready and comfortable and trusting to talk about the real issues that are facing your communities, whether it's clean air or politics generally, making sure that you're forming those relationships so that they can transcend whatever it may be. But I'll give some examples and then I'm going to invite everyone to talk about how they find folks in their community that have shared values that might be willing to take action with them. This is the foundation of community organizing. That term, I think, is a little bit opaque, but organizing is really just gathering a group of people together to take action. So community organizing is just when you get your community all together to start taking action together. Um, but how do we find folks in our community that would want to advocate with us? Where might people gather that care about a similar issue? And I'm going to invite you to answer those questions in the chat. So I listed a couple examples here, but where do you guys find out about information? Where do you find out about events? Where do you find out about, you know, some new facility that might be coming to your community? What are the ways that you hear about those things? Maybe it's your grandma, maybe it's a Facebook group, maybe it's the soccer moms group chat. Libraries and cafes, great one. Yeah, just the posters around town is a really good one. When you're waiting at a stoplight, if you're walking through town and you see a bunch of posters, you can find some really interesting and important news on those things. Yoga folks, running groups, librarians. Librarians are such a good one. Everyone should have a library card. Um, Really important to make sure that we are supporting our local libraries that equip us with so much knowledge and are such important organizing spaces. Farmers markets, yeah, Facebook, coffee shops, these are great. Yeah, anytime you see people sort of tabling, that's a term that we use in the movement a lot, is basically if Elizabeth and I set up a table at a farmer's market or at a community event and we just had fact sheets out and we just started talking to people. That's what tabling is. If you see people tabling at an event, they often are very plugged in and they're a really good person to stay in contact with so that you can find out about whatever events they're hosting or events that they know about, and just making sure that you're telling people what you're looking for. So, what are you passionate about, and making sure that people in your community know that so that they can pass along opportunities. Climate listservs, volunteer groups, yeah, these are great. Awesome. Well, I hope everyone keeps thinking about these questions and, does some Googling around what lists might exist that they're not a part of yet. But with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Elizabeth to close us out and to take some questions. Thanks for all of the wonderful conversation in the chat, everyone.
Yeah, I'm super, super excited how everyone has been so plugged in and engaged. Um, that's what I love about Mom's Clean Air Force and everyone that shows up. And thank you so much, like I said, for your energy tonight. I know it's getting late for some of us on the East Coast, but I'd like to do what we call a call to action at the speed of moms. So on your screen, you can see there we have a QR code to sign our petitions. We know you're busy. In fact, one of my favorite things that Moms has coined is called nap time activism. That hooked me when my son was very young. I started with Moms in 2012. My son was very young back then, and to take 15 minutes to learn about a cause or an issue or something that will impact our community, and then have the opportunity to share that my voice with people who are decision makers has been incredible as far as like uplifting just even my own mood to when now as an organizer I go in and I cannot tell you how many times I've gone into a meeting and I will hear from said, Representative Elizabeth, my office was flooded with X amount of people telling me about, your concerns about petrochemical industry. And I light up every time because they do pay attention. So I want to, personally tell you that your voice matters and they do get those petitions. Their offices do recognize the power of our voices. Um, so here are three easy actions you can take before our next session, which is Tuesday, October 7th. Obviously, we have the petitions you can sign. I would love for you all to meet a neighbor, check in with an old friend, and just say, hey, have you heard about Mom's Clean Air Force? Have you heard about these really neat ways that you can get involved? And find a way to plug into your local community. So I hope everybody had an opportunity to learn something new tonight. And I'm excited to continue to grow us all as advocates. And thank you for showing up. Is there anyone who, I think we're going to take a minute here too. Sam is going to pull up our website. And we will take you just a minute here. If you haven't spent time on the Moms Clean Air Force website, there is a plethora of information. But one of the things that you can do, especially if you're, here is the just an introduction of who we are as Moms Clean Air Force, what our mission statement is. We have printable sheets like this too for folks who are interested in getting others to join. We have a resource library here. You can search a topic. You can put it in by date, language. I am very proud to say that Moms Clean Air Force makes all of our material available in Spanish as well. So if everyone has an opportunity to learn about these things and also participate in, signing their names to petitions. And as you can see here at the bottom of all of these sheets, so air pollution, extreme heat, and Black maternal health. Um, it will give you at the very bottom of that, you'll be able to click at the bottom and send your message. Here is another example. You can see that we have it bilingual again. Save the greenhouse gas reporting program. I can't believe that we are actually having conversations with EPA saying that they have to do the job of reporting um, and measuring greenhouse gases in order to protect our families. But once again, I can't even tell you how powerful your voices really are. When you do sign our petitions, once again, I can tell you from just lived experience, people are coming to me, and even when wearing this red t-shirt, I'll tell another anecdotal story. There was a bunch of moms. We were with our t-shirts walking near the mall in DC, and from across the mall, I hear moms, and it's a group of legislative aides from an office. And although I couldn't identify what office they were from, because they were so far away, I knew exactly that they were staffers who were very aware of who we are and our presence. So I want to say that that is because of all of you. So thank you for all that you do. Because every time you sign that petition, every time they get something, we are definitely uplifting a lot of voices that need to be uplifted at this time. So thank you from the deep bottom of my heart. Thank you. Um, so with that, I've done a lot of talking. Sam has done a lot of talking. Is there anyone who has any questions for us before we close out this first chapter of our series?